Hello, listeners of this podcast. I have the pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. April Brown to the show. Welcome, April, Dr. April.
Welcome. I'm so excited to be on the show.
Thank you so much for being here. Dr. April Brown is a licensed mental health Christian counselor, board certified telemental health provider, national certified counselor, Florida certified sex therapist, and a qualified clinical supervisor. She is licensed in Florida, Wisconsin, New York, and New Jersey. She has a thriving practice since 2005 in Cape Coral, where she specializes in anxiety, depression, self-esteem, trauma, relationships, and sex therapy, emotionally supports animals, and telemental health. So we would focus on your relationship and potentially sex therapy work, which is where my knowledge overlaps with yours.
Yes. What I feel like I truly specialize in when you look at all of that is really intimacy with self,
Right.
with spirit, and with loved ones.
Sure. That runs
Yeah.
across all of those areas.
Yes.
Dr. April, trends do you find in your counseling practice working with couples?
So the trends that I find, especially recently in the last maybe 3 to 4 years, is that many couples feel disconnected. And what I mean disconnected is that emotional piece of being there for one another, that communication piece, that emotional piece. The pandemic has probably heightened that. In fact, it makes people realize, that they were stuck together, but somehow they weren't connecting. I'm not sure if it's the different media aspects or the pressures of society, or also just the feeling of isolation because the community hasn't been there for families and couples as it used to be.
Would you say that COVID may have combined with a situation where most families in the West were already sort of nuclear? They lacked a support network in their own neighborhood or within, reasonable distance from where they live.
Yes, I would say it's definitely COVID was one aspect. COVID, and then I also think just politics overall has kept a lot of people like, I can't talk and trust and talk to my neighbor. Before I was afraid I'd get sick. Now, of course, it's, I'm afraid that we're not on the same political page. So it's kept everybody like secluded. I can't trust my neighbor. I can't trust this person. I can't trust this person. So as, there's a saying that goes, it takes a village to raise a kid. But now couples and families are feeling like we have to do it all just ourselves.
Right. Feelings about that. There's a lot of constraints for the nuclear family. You're explaining good reasons why people ended up not trusting neighbors and so on and so forth as well. People in relationships end up expecting a lot from their spouses because they're often the only person they are in an intimate relationship with. I mean, intimate in terms of emotionally intimate as well. I feel it came as a loss in many ways. Disintegration of communities and large families.
Yeah, what you're saying is definitely true. I think especially in the millennial population, they believe that partner is supposed to be everything to me. Like I'm putting all my eggs in that basket. Where back in 40s and 50s, women had women friends that they used to, go to tea with and have a community with, and men had their men friends. Now it's like young couples, there's like, no, my partner and I do everything together. And when you do everything together and you're like this, there is no air. There's no passion. There's no fire.
That's interesting.
So I encourage the people, it's okay if she has a girls' night, he has a, guy's night, or whatever the case may be. It's okay that you don't have to do everything together. There needs to be some overlap. You can't, be totally separate lives, but it's okay to have friendships.
The right amount of me time for each of them, the right amount of shared experiences. I suppose the shared experiences are important, but you're making a point that only shared everything without me time COVID emphasized that it was everything together.
Right. Did you see that in your practice also?
Did I see that in my practice? I feel like during COVID, yes. I feel it's the lack of time. There's not enough time for me time, shared experiences, quality conversations in the evenings. Very often, most evenings in the week are dominated by tiredness and disappointment because you hope that the other person has the energy to greet you with a smile, even if you don't have that energy to give a smile. Yeah, so lack of time on the nuclear family, perhaps my main comment. The main challenge for the nuclear family is the lack of time, because obviously large families wouldn't have a childcare issue as much as a nuclear family does.
Yeah, and you're right in the sense of this whole lack of income, especially here in a capitalistic kind of world, or over here in the West, where couples and people, we work. We don't have much downtime. And sometimes we're expected to work overtime, or we work overtime even without getting paid. And like you said, we only have so much energy. So we work 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and then we come home and we don't have energy to do exactly the same things that you're talking about.
Yes, because the me time that you were referring to becomes particularly important, because anything that is not quality, there's no need to be together if it's not quality.
Right.
And if I'm witnessing my tired spouse 5 nights a week who ends up on the sofa needing to, by watching TV or being on Facebook, it's the opposite of quality sometimes, because you end up feeling ignored. So it's best that that person goes out or take a hot shower or does their own thing in the beds, because you don't need to witness. Quality is definitely more important than quantity, I feel.
Right, exactly. And I think sometimes people, maybe especially women, but overall, they think they always have to be on and do stuff for people. It's like, recently spoke with some moms, and they're like, no, I cannot take time for myself, because if I take time for myself, that is selfish. That's against my belief system. And I come from a Christian background. And I just, I say quickly, I said, even Jesus took breaks. Even he went by himself. He wasn't healing all the time. Yeah. And I go, why did he do that? I go, because he had a human body. So for our human body, we need time to rest. You know what I'm saying? Because if not, our mind will go nuts. You need time to shut it down, to rest, so your mind can repair things.
Do you find, is there any gender differences that could be commented on?
I do think for somehow that men can sometimes do a little bit more better at resting sometimes. And it depends on how you were raised. If you saw your parents rest or watch TV or sat down, then it's more apt that you would. But if you didn't see them, if you saw them working, then you have a harder time. Especially for women, they feel like, and I think part of the 80s, as women, we think we can always multitask. We can do 50 million things at once. And as we're learning through research, that multitasking is not healthy. I think men do a better job at doing one thing at a time and getting it done. Even though wives get upset, the men do the one thing, get it done, then do the next. And women, we try to do all these multitasking and, like, why can't you do all this? But women, that's not healthy. I mean, what we're doing, it's not healthy.
Is it maybe is efficient but draining? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. And overall, it just becomes, because you're using, like, if your body is here, like right now we're here at this moment, but if our mind is 5 minutes up, or 10 hours back, or 2 years back, we're using double energy, psychologically, spiritually, and mentally. We're supposed to be in the present moment.
Right. I see what you're saying. If you're multitasking, it tells me that you're not in the present, because you're holding multiple things at once in your consciousness, I suppose. That's an interesting angle. Can we learn from different cultures, current cultures, worldwide cultures, or past ones?
Yeah, as some people say there's bad aspects of social media, but there's some good aspect because it's bringing the world together. That people get to see other cultures and how things interact. And as families blend, as we're all moving all over the world, we can learn how different cultures do things. So as you create your family, you can realize, well, there's different ways. How can I create a family where we are spending quality time together?
I cannot comment from my own personal life because my parents' generation was the first generation in Italy they're now in the late 70s, but they had half of the children that their own parents. So my grandparents' generation, if I had witnessed that, I would be able to comment how current European families could compare to larger families versions of those cultures. But I work with a lot of people from the Indian subcontinent, so Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Indians. And, I witnessed pressure, I suppose, particularly daughters-in-law feel the pressure and sometimes interference. But there is also a lot of support with childcare. Children have a lot of stimulation and affection from elderly and large. So lots of pros and cons. But the cons that I find are also to do with the mixture of being Western and modern and having peers that perhaps have independence from relatives that perhaps some of these clients don't have. So again, it's difficult to comment even on these families because even what doesn't go particularly well could be as a result of maybe I would prefer to be more independent. But that's what happened in the West. We fought for more individual independence, and then you lose, then you gain that, but overnight you also lose all the support for you and your children overnight.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking from my own experience, growing up African American family that was based from Jamaica in some aspect, but also step family and all that. But also in school wise, I was raised in a Catholic all-white environment in some aspect. But then a lot of my friends were from Asia, from Germany, just a variety of things. And I've also in my adult life have lived in a family that's from Belgium and from Italy. Okay. So I've seen a mix of that. And so in the sense of families that have these extended families, and which is great, but sometimes now as we move, one thing that I've learned is that you can create this support system, you know what I'm saying, of a family. A family can be someone that you truly, they don't have to necessarily be blood related, someone that you truly trust and have that connection with as part of your family. I learned that there was, as I was growing up, I would call sometimes people aunt and uncles, kind of from an Asian aspect, but they may not have been my blood related. You know what I'm saying? So you can create that family, extended family, to help you as a couple, but also to help you in the sense of raising your kids. Yeah.
Yes. I find it's a bit tricky though. In my lifetime, I can count maybe 2 to 3 friendships that resisted me moving countries or resisted my interest becoming very different than my friend's interest. It has to be a very, very solid, profound friendship in order to resist the test of time. With relatives, we don't choose them, so often we're not really compatible. But there is that thing that, am I going to say, you can count on them, because it's not always the case, of course, but they do resist the test of time.
Right. Yes, but for those young couples out there, and I'm just thinking when I was, my little one's grown now, but when I was working and I had a little one, if I didn't create certain friendships that were like family, you know what I'm saying? So that when I had an emergency and maybe I couldn't pick my child up, I had a friend who could do it. You know what I'm saying? Or if my partner and I needed to do a date night, I had someone that he could watch my kid, or I could watch their kid. You know what I'm saying? It created this community. So I didn't feel isolated and overwhelmed. And that's not only just dealing with caring for your kids, but also as I'm an older person now, caring for your elderly. I have friends I can lean on, that can help in, that step in, and I can step in and help them out. That is important.
You've managed to keep them throughout the years.
Yes, yes. It's kind of going back, Francisco, to what you said, quality.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, so I'm not one who will talk to a girlfriend every day. That's just not me. I would, as a therapist, we'd talk all day long. But the time that I do spend with my family member or with my friends, it's quality, which means I'm fully present. I'm giving them my undivided attention. Maybe it doesn't come every 6 months, but they know it's quality. And they know that, hey, if I need some, if I call her, you can depend on me. That is so much more important.
That's very hopeful. That's a very hopeful message. We can create that support network by nurturing these friendships with quality time. It doesn't need to be time consuming, because we said time is probably the most needed currency these days. But you can give quality to that friends, make them feel like they're really important, and they can remain your friends throughout your lifetime.
Yes, yeah, and definitely. I know sometimes as parents, they feel like, oh my gosh, I have to give everything to my kid. But it is good to teach your kids how to be a little bit self sufficient and how to be okay playing by themselves. Don't feel like you have to entertain.
Dr. April, so we indirectly talked about tradition and modernity by talking about large families and nuclear families. What do you find in your couple counseling practice about traditional long-term relationship, such as marriage, and other types of relationship styles, such as ethical non-monogamy? And with that, I suppose if you prefer to comment on marriage, maybe we can focus and zoom in on that, and how can we support couples preparing for something like marriage?
I think helping support couples who are wanting to get married, it's really important for the couple to actually talk about, to see what they saw growing up. Okay. People don't realize what you see growing up impacts what you end up doing in a marriage. And even if it's something that you dislike, you may end up turning to do that because it's in your subconscious mind.
Yes.
So it's good to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? Everything from, this is how I saw my parents raise me, whether, they believed in spanking, not in spanking, believed going to church, not going to church, were they savers, spenders, all these things add up. Were they morning people? Were they drinkers? All these things impact how we show up in our marriage. So it's really good to support your couple and to talk about maybe getting them premarital counseling or meeting with somebody, whether it's a pastor or whatever, to have those discussions. And it's as you discuss it, then you can learn how to compromise. This is how I want to raise my family. So you kind of have a plan. You know what I'm saying? A goal.
Sounds like you're referring to values, because you mentioned what did you interject, internalized from your parents or your culture, your upbringing.
Right.
So are we talking about what values are essential for you, basic and foundational?
Exactly, exactly. When you are out there looking for a mate, it's really important that your values, overall values, are aligned. If you end up going into a relationship and you totally change your value system, whatever that is, many times you end up losing yourself. And when you lose yourself, that becomes, and you try to pretend to be someone you're not, that becomes a whole nother can of worms. Yes. So it's good to have that discussion of values.
Yes, what comes up is a dominant person, a person that is probably too dominant, and the other person that becomes too much of a follower, whether he's afraid of, for different reasons, don't end up bringing her true self to the table. So what you're saying is then this is gonna manifest later down the line. So that conversation of what you really want, what your values really are, is best to be had sooner rather than later.
Exactly, because you don't want to have resentment. You know what I'm saying? Let's say you grew up or whatever, you really want to have dinner every night, as a family. I mean, that's what you envision, that's what you want and all that kind of stuff. But you never really discuss it.
Yes, yes.
And then your partner works real late, this and that, and you never have dinner.
And work is really important. Maybe work is really important for that person, right?
Right. Then later on, you're going to resent it. It's going to be a big doggone argument. So it's good to have those discussions right there in the beginning.
Yes, yes. Sometimes love, passion gets in the way of love is not enough, right?
Right.
So I guess sometimes we don't have the discussion because we feel very much in love or because we are afraid of losing that person. So we end up following the lead.
Right, exactly. People don't want to communicate. Oh my gosh, if I bring it up, then it's really going to be a problem. Well, if you don't bring it up, it's going to be a problem. Yes.
Big
But it's
one.
how you bring it up. It's how you bring it up. You know, if you bring it up with this accusatory that you did this, you, it's going to be a problem. You know, it's how you bring it to the table matters, whether you slam it down on the table or whether you gently put it down and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. Just, I would like to have a discussion. What are your thoughts about it? Yes, it opens people up to have that conversation.
Both of us were brought up Catholic, and you actually describe yourself as a Christian therapist. And I didn't personally prepare for my own marriage through the church, but I know that the Catholic Church does offer preparation for marriage. I suppose what I want to say about traditional societies and religious societies is that standards and the roles of men and women, husband, wife, co-parent, providing a spouse or household spouse are more defined, whether it's the church that prepares you for it or whether you're just really informed by what you've witnessed from your parents, grandparents, peers. There's a lot of experience from your society, traditional society, can guide you as to what your role is and what is fair to expect from your spouse, because there are so many other peers that would have very similar rules and boundaries. So before you were actually giving us an example of a non-traditional setup where you create your own communities, people you have affinities with that you met throughout your life, not necessarily religious. So can a discussion about values be had, and can a solid long-term relationship be built where only one person is religious or neither of them, so that you don't have any societies to inform what your role is, fair expectation is. So everything needs to be built, I suppose, whether with a therapist, couple therapist or not, needs to be built from scratch. Nothing can be taken for granted. I guess that's the main difference between a traditional family and a non-traditional family. There's very little that can be taken for granted.
Right, definitely. And like you said, there's churches and even the Catholic churches and other traditional methods that prepare couples. And these traditional methods, I do think that they're great, but I think sometimes they're missing other elements that you have to make sure that it's covered. A lot of the premarital and religious aspects sometimes, and it's just from my own personal life and from listening to my couples and all that, sometimes they talk about certain things, or how can I put it? They talk about it and they give like, well, this is what you shouldn't do. This is what you should do. This is what you shouldn't do. This is what you shouldn't do. But they don't help couples apply it. Like what was it? What is it for me? That's one aspect. Number two is sometimes they don't talk about certain topics. Like sex is, I'm a sex therapist. So sex is one of the things that sometimes couples don't even talk about. Of course, you're horny in the beginning, but how do you keep a healthy sex life throughout? And finances, they don't talk about sometimes. And those are really two main issues that happen in a relationship. So having those discussions are important. And if you're asking about whether a person who is, religious gets with, or spiritual gets with someone who's not, those topics have to be discussed. If you value something and your partner doesn't value, how are you guys are going to make it? What are the boundaries here?
Yes.
Yeah.
What are the roles?
What are the roles? Yes. Yeah. And the roles, I'm glad you mentioned that. So roles, even traditional roles, you have to think about when you look at roles, what's underneath the roles? What are those responsibilities? Does that mean since I'm a woman that I cook every day, or is that something you need to have a discussion about? Do I enjoy it, or can my partner do it? and maybe looking at each person as what are they good at, where their weaknesses at, and how you can work together. Like for myself, I've never been not good at cooking. That's just something that I can organize 50 million things, but organizing more than one dish at a time stresses me out. I don't know why, but it's just something I'm just not good at. But I'm upfront with that. That was upfront from day one, and it's no reflection of my parents. Mom tried her best, teaching me how to cook. But that's me. And I'm okay with that. Yeah. And my partner is okay with that. But that's something that was discussed from day one. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Shall we end this podcast by inquiring about what can save Western couples? What we touched on several aspects: support from neighborhood, discussion on values from the outset. Is there anything to emphasize?
Yeah, for Western couples, I think one thing, and I'm just going to use a Western concept, when you enter into a partnership, into a marriage, kind of guys like a corporation, okay? The top has to communicate and stay strong, because if not, it affects the bottom.
Right.
So in staying strong, that means meeting regularly, okay? It's really important, couples, to still enjoy date night, and date nights and it doesn't have to be like a date night. It could be, every Tuesday, 2:00, you guys go and get ice cream, just some date time. And in those moments, you connect. You talk about love, and you talk about how much you guys like each other and all that. But then there's another aspect where couples need to have other kind of meeting, a meeting to talk about finances. You don't talk about finances at a date, a budget, or talking about your schedules. It's just, you keep those separate than the date time.
Right.
Also important to understand how your partner feels love, like they talk about the 5 love languages or whatever, but how they feel love, and for you to be able to provide that for them, and for you to say how you feel love, and for your partner to provide that to you. Okay?
Right.
It's also important, another concept is that this world is difficult, and you're going to go through challenges, whether there's health crisis, job loss, 50 million things. How do you keep your couple, your bond resilient to that? How do you stay connected even though the world may be turning upside down? Because trauma is, something's going to happen. Yes. So it's really good to understand how you deal with stress and how your partner deals with stress, so you can recognize it. And so you can communicate and be able to help one another out. Because sometimes I've been working with couples, and maybe one has stopped talking, and then the person feels like, oh my gosh, it's the other partner, it's about me, and it's resentment. But maybe they stop talking, maybe because there is some stress at job. It started off with that, but then it developed into all this resentment, and now they're bickering. When really, we had noticed right at the beginning, and we addressed it then.
What a brilliant summary. And understanding your partner's love language so that you can give and they can receive, because a long time without receiving something essential, some love, is not good at all. Understanding what triggers makes your partner very vulnerable, and sooner or later we're gonna have a crisis. You said there will be. That's exactly life. Sooner or later it does happen. How do you bounce back? Because you called it trauma. Yes, that's the baggage, that's the trauma, that creates resentment. So the ability to bounce back from these crises is another essential quality to learn.
Right, definitely, because that's where many couples struggle. You know what I'm saying? I feel like my partner didn't show up when my mother died, or my job loss, or, I have cancer, or whatever. Yeah, yes. So that's why you have to discuss those things and understand those things. What does it look like when you're stressed? How can I support you in XYZ? Because it's going to happen. Your life is not going to be just perfect. I mean, that's just how, we all have something that we're going through in life.
Dr. April, it was a delight to talk to you, and hopefully we'll do one more, because the first chat is always difficult to sort of zoom in and go deep. We talked a lot about quality today. Let's have a quality discussion on this topic because it's our first chat. We wanted to have a comprehensive overview of what we find in our practices. So thank you for having that chat with me today.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to be a guest on your podcast. And I really appreciate